trying quite hard to get this one right because it is important. Dealing with what's going on today and where I'm living and how I'm feeling about it all is probably have to abdicate some responsibility because I just find that and this is a whole life thing that I don't have. I think I used to. I mean, I remember in high school, in middle school, Mr. Metro, and I remember I was 14, I think, and we're in his class, and we were discussing the Soviet Union, which was alive and kicking at that time, and 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 it was the early 70s. That's right, it was the early 70s. So all this stuff was going on, Vietnam, and my girlfriend's sisters and brothers were older and they were all involved in the peace movement and stuff like that. And so I was surrounded by this, and Dr. King had just been shot, and Malcolm X recently. So there was a lot of really difficult, horrible things for a kid to be looking at who was just, interested in, the arches and girls at the time, I think. And he confronted me because I was quite a I contributed a lot in class, shall we say. And he said, well, what would you do? I said, with the bad people. And I said, well, I'd let them know that I know that they were bad people. And he said, well, they're still there. What would you do? What would you? So he kept forcing me, backing me up, backing me up, backing me up. And then he said, and blah. And then he said, and then I said, I'd line them up and shoot them all. And he went, aha, like that. He caught me. And I'll never forget that incident because pretty quickly, living through then the 70s, the 80s, the 90s in England and in the United States, there were out there. And I remember also, gosh, yes, another incident was at drama school, and the Russians had invaded Afghanistan, and it was big news. So it was the late 70s, 79 maybe. And I heard about this, and my brother David was a Marine at the time. And suddenly I went, oh, fuck. Oh, my God. Because I envisioned him, going over there. And that's right. That's what I envisioned. And somebody came in, some other actor boy came in. He said, oh, the Russians, they're just brainwashed. And I thought, wait a minute, because I was making an equivalence between my brother and some young Russian soldier, and that upset me. So I've been learning over the years that I'm really not good at looking, or I'm not very good at looking at. When I lived in England, I was really bad at. I couldn't join in the conversations because it was an agreement in England when I was growing up that the Russians were a race apart. They were awful people by and large. They were awful people, and they had awful leaders, and they were like Mordor. They were Sauron. As this wonderful Viggo Mortensen was being interviewed by Charlie Rose back in the day when the Lord of the Rings had just come out, and Charlie was very excited about this notion of the hordes coming out of the east and the metaphor and all of that. And Viggo grinned and he said, oh, you think they're Mordor, right? And it's not a matter of demonizing. It's not a counter-demonizing. It's not that. It's just simply an inability to demonize, right? So, and this is a time when, which side are you on, boys? Everybody chooses a side. And I'm not immune. I mean, there's lots of people that I find lots of cultural isms that I find very difficult to sympathize with. But I, by and large, don't. If I was a European, if I was a European, if I lived for 500 years as a European, and we got to this point in time, some part of me would be going, Jesus, we've got to change. We can't keep doing this. And during my lifetime, which is not quite 500 years, but during my lifetime, there's always been the hope that something might change. Dr. King was a huge influence on me right about the time that I was with Mr. Metro, and other movements. I was like, oh, there's all this stuff going on. There's stuff going on, and I watched this thing. I was in England, and the recent election they were having. No, I wasn't in it. I was here. And they were having the recent election, and they had 7 parties, not the big 3 or 4, but there's 7 other smaller parties who they had their debate. And they were asked a question about commitment to defense. And I thought, for the first time in my life, not a single party said, we want to reduce the defense budget. We want to work towards peace. The Greens, the left-wing socialists, the my cousin Ed socialists, the down the allotment communists, the whole gang, we're all like, we need to raise more money. We need to commit to spending more money on defense. And I guess I'm admitting I'm wrong here. I have to be wrong because everybody else seems to be involved in this thing, and it's just a matter of saying, since World War II, the U.S. has been involved in wars that have killed 12 million people. Since World War II, I've just been looking it up. You had. And this is not civil wars, all the rest of it. That's a different thing to me. But the international wars against an outside enemy, China and Russia, you add them up, and they're not. It's not 12 million. And since 9/11, it's been 4.5 or 6 million died in U.S. involved wars. And massively the enemy, huge numbers of most of that 4.5 million have been the enemy or civilians. And so the thing that one imagines is it's very Tolkien. It's very Dune. It's very much to do with a small and beleaguered community of righteous, the good people, surrounded by the Harkonnen or whatever they're called, or the orcs and the Uruk-hai and Sauron and all that. That's how the world is, and I know where that worldview comes from, and I just don't share it. I wish, and I don't think I ever have. I think I've tried. So when various people that I kind of follow and pay attention to, James O'Brien says, he's written a book, They Ruined Britain. Or my boy there, Gary Stevenson, is this great guy on YouTube, just wonderful chap. And he's saying, he's complaining about the rich, and how the rich are doing this and the rich are doing that. And I look at it and I go, it's all quite natural what they're doing. Which of us wouldn't, right? And there's something about like when George Bush Jr. was in power, when the Iraq War all started up and they went to bomb the fuck out of Iraq. which had nothing to do with 9/11. If they were really interested in the vengeance, which it was vengeance, they would have bombed the hell out of Saudi Arabia. But we don't, because they're our buds. For some, God knows why. But just if you came from Mars and you said, well, let's look at this as, so who are you telling me is evil? Who is evil here? Oh, that country has had all of these wars. Well, then, no, they can't be evil because we've heard they're not evil. It has to be that guy who's evil, who's not had all these wars and who's not killed 12 million, 4.5 million people since 9/11. So yeah, I mean, I don't have that gene. I am deficient.